Welcome, everyone. Good evening. This is the December 6th, 2022 Teaching and Learning Committee meeting of the School Board for the School District of Waukesha. Tonight, first thing on the agenda is just verification that the meeting's been properly posted.
Yes.
Thank you. Second item is an action to approve the teaching and learning minutes from the November 1st, 2022 committee meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Zenobia.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. Seeing no movement toward comments or corrections, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is an opportunity for public comment, for which I don't see a script. Clever. Yes, please. There was an update to board docs, so I got that warning earlier today. Thank you. All right, we're now at this section of our meeting where there's an opportunity for citizens to speak. We have one speaker tonight who will be allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments and will be notified at 3 minutes. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. This committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We would like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and the podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Our speaker tonight is Paul Reese. Welcome, Mr. Reese.
Good evening. I'm going to talk tonight about human growth and development. In my daughter's health class, we opted out of that portion. When human growth and development came out, we said, we don't want this. We opted my daughter out, and we weren't alone. That did not stop my daughter from receiving a couple of the assignments. They were emailed to her. We've talked to the teacher, and hopefully this ends and doesn't get any more, but I want to talk about what they were. You know, the cost of a baby project, as well as the contraceptive worksheet, or the two that she got. Even though she didn't have to do them, she still got them. But the cost of a baby, what is the cost of a baby? What does that have to do with anything? It's something, if you want to talk about how we've struggled with having children and worried about children, that's happened since the beginning of time. That's what turns our hair gray. You know, that's what does it to us. It's the worries that we're going to have feeding our children. It is a struggle that has gone on since the beginning. So to say the cost of a baby, what about the cost of not having one? What are the prices of not having a child, to go childless? You know, me and my wife struggled to have a kid, the first one. We had a miscarriage. We went and saw doctors, and we struggled to have a kid. And finally we were blessed with my daughter. And the doctor said, if you want to have more children, come back and see us. Well, we got busy, life went on, and we got our plans together and what we were going to do. And then, lo and behold, 9 years later, my wife became pregnant. And I was upset. I was not happy. I was 59 years old. It was not where I wanted to be in life. This was not where I wanted to go. I had plans on doing things. I had a 9, soon-to-be 10-year-old daughter. I did not want this child. And I really struggled with that. And, you know, it came to a point where I realized that God has known him since the beginning. And who am I to doubt this? And it humbled me. At that moment, I was humbled, and I realized that this is what God has known this kid. And since then, I'll never go to Europe, and I'll never see parts of the world. But yet I have the world at my door. You know, I have this son that we had. I mean, I'm not kidding you when I say I had the best time of my life this summer. I spent catching frogs and snakes and turtles and all this stuff. And I'd give up the world to do that all my life. I regret not having children sooner and not having more. You know, this is what human growth and development is. This is what it's about. It's not about me. This becomes less about me and the Paul Show and what I can achieve in life and have, and more about who I get to share it with. Because even if I went to France, I tell you, if I went to Spain, anywhere, when I die in my bed, I will think about catching frogs and chasing snakes and flipping these over. Not any of that other noise that was in my life. But these aren't the things that we're talked about. We're told, no, contraceptive and the cost of having one. What is it going to cost you? You know, my parents never worried about that. They call them boomers, the boomer generation. They had kids. My uncle just passed away. He was married 68 years to his wife. They got married as teenagers. They had a successful life. They didn't have everything, but they had each other. You know, as the saying goes. That was a successful life. Who cares? He had everything that life could give him. Anyways, I wanted to bring that up because this was brought to my daughter, and this is why I opted out, why I don't want a part of it, because it doesn't go into those parts of the human part of this. It just makes it about money and things, and not about humanity and the love that one has for others, and how, even at 50 years old, you learn this. Anyways, so thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Next item on the agenda tonight is our action to approve overnight field trip requests. We have 2 field trip requests this evening, and we can take these collectively. Mrs. Landish, do you want to provide a little update?
Sure. So Mr. Olson's here from Butler, so thank you for being here. He is part and parcel of the 8th grade trip. So that's the second attachment you see before you. The Butler 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C., upon which no school is missed because it happens after school gets out. So he is available should you have any questions on that. And then the second one is from HOSA, and just to remind people what that is about, it's Future Health Professionals, and it's that student-led group, and it's advancing to the State Leadership Conference, so they usually have a handful of students that will attend that as well. Mrs. Reeder could not be here, but again, pretty traditional, both of these, in terms of historical context for our students.
What questions do any of you have? I'm not seeing any. It's nice to be back in a situation where we can send our kids out to do things that are really meaningful. So, I guess the only question that I have, and I don't know, since Mr. Olson is here tonight, I want to make good use of his time. I don't want to put you on the spot, but with the Washington, D.C. trip and the cost associated with that, I'm excited about the trip. I think it's an important milestone for 8th graders if they want to participate in that. What types of fundraising activities do they have?
So,
Try to
Mr. Jason, I should note
Mr.
this by
Fager,
saying
yeah.
that this is my first year teaching, so.
Welcome to the district. We're happy to have you. Stay a long time.
Much. Yeah, I'm a hometown boy. I was born right down at Memorial Hospital, and so I'm teaching at Butler, which is right down the street from that. So, yeah, I'm very proud to be back in the community. But Again, Jason Fager and I, the other 8th grade social studies teacher, we're kind of in the preliminary phase of figuring that out. So we have spoken with Mrs. Laura Gennaro, who's the principal at Butler as well. And so Jason has done this trip, I think, about 10 times. He did it from, I think, 2003 to about 2013. And then his children were growing up in the district, so he had to step away from that. But that's something that we are going to figure out in the next couple months. And so I don't know if I've already said this, but this is through the World Strides organization, which he himself has been involved with as well. So I'm sorry, we don't have anything in specific right now.
That's okay.
What we're going to be setting down.
Yeah, that's okay. No, I'm enthusiastic about this opportunity. I think it's an important milestone.
Yeah.
Again, welcome to the district. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
I think the fundraising opportunities are always kind of a priority, right? We want to make sure that there's plenty of time and that the kids have chances to raise some of those dollars. I know even Mr. Moore has commented before that going on these trips has been important, but also having the opportunity to raise that money ahead of time and doing it in a way where they really feel that ownership of going on the trip and seeing our nation's capital. So,
And if I may, I do have specifics. I'm not sure if this was communicated to you, but for a 4-day trip, the price, as of now, it says it's $1,805. And so, like I said, Jason Fager and I will be sitting down pretty soon to be kind of hashing that out and to figure how the fundraising campaign can work.
and just as a clarification, this is open to all Butler 8th grade completing students.
So, to my understanding, I believe, and I have to talk with Jason again, we actually kind of sat down and talked about this a month ago, so this is fairly recent. But to my understanding, it's only for students that are currently 6th and 7th grade students standing. That's something that I have to double check. I'm not 100% sure, so are you? Okay, I can talk to you about that. Yeah, so that's something, like I said, that we still need to work out. But that said, just throughout my history classes, and I know that this isn't really data to go off of, but I have had a lot of students that have been questioning me about that because I loosely mentioned it, and then I had the understanding that they weren't able to go. I found that out later, but so that's something you and I can speak about, I suppose.
I'll let you know what the specifics are.
Okay, wonderful, yeah. But it seems like those students are enthused, which is good to see, even though it's so far out.
All right. I'd be looking for a motion to approve the field trips as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Kozlowski. Seconded by Mr. Moore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, 5-0. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you, everyone, have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a request for approval of the Education for Employment Plan.
This is my first time being here without having to present, so I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing.
Welcome, Molly.
I'm not gonna lie.
So,
Sure. Am I presenting again?
Oh, okay. So, I'm sorry, we're having a dialogue here. So, a newer format for teaching and learning, as you know, is doing the preview video before the night. So Molly's just like, am I presenting again? So, each of the board members and a few people who are on YouTube certainly had the ability to preview this ahead of time, but we still do want you to go over the super highlights. You don't need to necessarily go over the entire presentation, but we definitely want you to highlight a few of the main pillars of what we have going on. This will be something that the board does need to take action on, and I'm sure they'll have questions as well as affirmations for you as well, so.
Hey, all right, well, thanks for having me, everyone. Molly Haubenschild, the Career and Technical Education Coordinator for the district. And annually, I present some information around our Ed for Employment Plan and an update to academic and career planning for the district. So I put together just some data highlights. The actual Ed for Employment document was included in your board docs, and it's just a logistics piece that outlines the major components that are included. So some highlights that I like to include, we have a pretty big group of students that participate in our career and technical education classes. We're sitting around 89% of juniors and seniors that have completed at least one course. And of those students, 81% of those seniors are considered what is a concentrator, meaning they've taken 2 or more classes in a very specific program of interest. So I give an example of if I want to be an accountant, I'm hoping I took accounting in high school, maybe 2 accountings, maybe a personal finance, or if I think I might want to be an engineer, I've taken some engineering or tech ed classes to kind of try those things out. Why that's important is, number one, we're giving our students the opportunity to explore these pathways earlier. Seeing if it's the right fit for them, but it also has quite a bit of data behind the fact that students that are considered CTE concentrators have a higher graduation rate. So awesome for our district that we have quite a few students that are considered that way. Another highlight is on industry certifications. In the last few years, we've really ramped these up. Last year, I think we doubled the size of students increased in earning those industry certifications. This year, there was an increase, but also an increase in students earning multiple certifications. In fact, we had a couple students earn 3 in their high school career. So awesome, they're getting some resume building opportunities in things like CNA, automotive service excellence, Autodesk Inventor, CAD software. I mean, you name it, there's almost something for everyone now. We've had steady participation in our work-based learning programs, whether it's Youth Apprentice or our local internship. We've added an additional transcripted credit, and that was our Autos 3 class with WCTC. It was formerly advanced standing, but this year we've moved it over to transcripted credit. And we also have the largest number of transcripted credit classes offered in Waukesha County with about an 80% pass rate, which is really awesome. So lots of really great opportunities for our students to earn college credit with us for a $0, which is amazing. Additionally, we have the Dual Enrollment Academy with WCTC. As part of that, we've seen an increase. We had a slight dip, but this year we've seen that increase go back up, and we've held really steady this year in terms of students that are trucking along successfully, which is really great to see. Last year we had 14 technical diplomas earned by our students. Both of our charter schools were considered Project Lead the Way Sites of Distinction, which is an honor that they've received the last few years. And then the DPI has recognized 5 of our regional career pathways as approved. That includes healthcare, which is really just nursing primarily, digital technologies, manufacturing, this is going off my top of my brain, construction, building trades, and, oh my gosh, I can do it. Not culinary, but we're adding education and training. So the DPI is actually in the final tweaking of that regional career pathway map. We have ours done. It's pretty much vetted. We're just waiting for the final touches on their end. So we'll have all of those. We use those in our counseling of students through the student services department, through junior conferences, things like that. So the students can really see a clear pathway between entry-level positions all the way on up to advanced degree positions within those industries. We partner with the Waukesha County Business Alliance quite heavily for a number of programs. I sit on the Education Steering Committee where we really look at issues in labor market shortages and how education might be able to tackle that. So right now I'm on a work group with them where we're looking at creating a work-based learning guide for parents and students so that they can really understand the differences between the programs that are offered, not just in Waukesha, but in Waukesha County. So we're going to have a draft of that hopefully by the end of this school year. We also partner heavily with our neighboring technical college. They provide us quite a bit of feedback. I'm on the Career Prep Council there where we really look at what are some opportunities for our students. We look at, if we're seeing an influx of students that are interested in a certain program, how might we capitalize on that for either transcripted credit courses offered in-house or a dual enrollment program, things like that. We also have our MAID partnership, which is an industry-based partnership where we work with our area manufacturing, design, engineering firms to really get some feedback, support, and they really bring up some cool projects for our students to interact with. So that's always a fun one that I like to talk about whenever I can. So we brought in some new partners this year, which is really great to see. Just on the horizon, something to look forward to is that the state is coming up with refreshed standards for all of the CTE areas. So that would be business and marketing, family consumer science, and tech ed. So as soon as we see those, obviously we're going to start taking a look at them. With the amount of course offerings we have in that area, we will not do all of the courses all at once because no. So we'll look strategically at how we can prioritize the most important courses in terms of maybe course enrollment, and then start to work our way through those courses, just refreshing the standards. As far as academic and career planning, it's a state mandate, grades 6 through 12, and we've been probably in this space for over 10 years, and it's been an evolution for some of us that have been since the beginning. But annually, our district team meets to assess just the overall goals and progress of that. We've made minor changes to the scope and sequence by grade level. Every year, we've adjusted what we need to based on feedback. We've added some new lessons based on feedback. We've tweaked things, got rid of things that were redundant. We also have continued to utilize what was method test prep that's now called Methodize. It's embedded in the tool that we use for academic and career planning, but this year we've strategically placed lessons for the method test prep or Methodize ACT prep in the different grade levels. So grade 9 has very specific lessons that they're doing 10 and 11 to help them get extra reps and some actual coaching around how to take the test. It's not just additional ACT questions, it's strategies in order to attack the test. Academic and career planning, we're starting to see, now that it's been kind of institutionalized, it's used frequently in junior conferencing. We're starting to see that progression of data show that students are actually taking a look at courses that align with their career pathways of interest and actually utilizing those pathways as a way to see if this is the right fit. And then our academic and career planning website is updated annually to include any new information, outlines of scope and sequences, and then any other resources for families, such as how to talk to your student about college and career readiness. I think that's all I have. So just once again, I'm really grateful to be a part of Waukesha and the opportunities that they have for our students. And I'm always happy to share those data points.
Before the board asks questions of Molly, I just want to make a connection for the board too. On your desks is a copy of the district report card. And I just wanted to make a connection for you in which the content that Molly's talking about. If you go to page 9 of 10 on the report card, it'll actually give you a participation breakdown by post-secondary prep. And so the items that Molly just talked to you around, dual enrollment, industry-recognized credentials, and work-based learning, you can actually see then on top of that the total number of students that are involved in Waukesha. So if you look at dual enrollment, you'll see that 722 students successfully completed. Oh, you don't have that in front of you?
No, this is an abbreviated.
Oh, you just printed the
version.
cover. All right, well then
No
I'll.
one ever gets to page 9.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to talk out loud then about page 9. So the dual enrollment that she references, we have 722 students in Waukesha successfully completed at least one dual enrollment course. For industry-recognized credentials, we have 120 students earned at least one industry-recognized credential. And for work-based learning, we had 112 students participated in a work-based learning program. So that just, again, can give you some context of actual numbers of students involved in what Molly was speaking about. So wanted to make that connection. When you do go to page 9, you can see that.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the update on the video as well. I always go to the last page because that's where all the limitations are usually listed, so. In this case, I think we really have something to celebrate. Our participation in career path-related learning opportunities is very, very positive. I think our partnership with WCTC is very strong. My question, and I'm going to take the floor here first, just as a clarification, is when do we start talking about this with students? I know we have this 6 through 12 requirement, but in terms of the course-related offerings, when does that conversation happen?
I can only speak to 6 through 12. I know it happens younger than that, though.
Okay.
But not in any formalized manner.
So formally, like, what would we do with a student, whether, sixth grade, eighth grade? I know the junior conferences are a big conversation around some of the programs that they could actually enroll in and participate in, but do they have that awareness 2-3 years before, knowing that, hey, I might want to do welding, or I might want to do this manufacturing thing, or when do they start to really learn about these things?
I would say as soon as sixth grade.
Okay.
Potentially sooner with the fifth grade class, learning about the middle school in general. I'm sure there's presentations that Student Services gives them about the different courses, but in sixth grade right now, there's not a lot of choice in what they're taking. It's a little bit more structured at that point.
But to Molly's point, where the lessons are structured does start in sixth grade. I should probably say this out loud because we've talked about it off camera too. We are looking at the high school conferencing and looking to have that happen at an earlier level as well, like perhaps sophomore year instead of just junior year, and kind of doubling up at the high school level in a more formal way for our parents and students. But to Molly's point, they are acclimated with some of the profiles as early as sixth grade.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, hi Molly.
Hello.
Thank you for your presentation and the video prep and all that went into this. Co-op programs, do they still exist and or have they morphed into like apprenticeships, or they're kind of similar? Could you explain maybe
Sure.
the differences? And
It's the same. We have tried to break away from the term co-op. Just doesn't sound as career-ready as an internship.
Sure.
So we've tried to rebrand it, years ago, but everyone still, it's co-op internship. It's now one thing as opposed to the other. So it's the same. We also have the youth apprentice, which hours-wise are similar, but the youth apprentice is registered through the Department of Workforce Development. And why that's a benefit is that those hours can sometimes bridge students into full apprenticeships. They have a very specific checklist that they use on skills. So comparing a student that's working in retail, great. I worked at Toys R Us for my internship. I learned a lot, but I didn't have anything that I was necessarily scored on, where if I look at the marketing youth apprenticeship for professional sales that exists now, they're very specific skills that they're being rated on. So that's kind of the difference.
yeah, how many students are participating in that, roughly?
120-ish.
I won't hold you to it. I mean, just a rough number.
120 between the two programs, let's say. It's probably heavier on the youth apprentice side of things now. We're sitting at about 75, I want to say. It's hard because the CNA students don't start their careers until after they take their tests, which takes some time. So I would say around 75 youth apprentices, and then the remainder are interns.
And compare that to 10 years ago. Roughly. It's grown, hasn't it?
I would say it's grown, especially in the youth apprentice side of things.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's stayed relatively steady. I think the students can go get a job regardless of these two programs, so we don't capture every student that's currently working.
Sure.
But the difference is these students are working and taking a course that corresponds with it typically, that's aligned to something of interest. So a student that's really interested in autos, they're taking that Autos 3 class, and they're working in a field, getting rated on those skills.
And there have been businesses that have, year after year, have created opportunities.
Yes.
And do we ever give them some acknowledgement?
This last year, we did plaques for them.
And I think at the bottom of the report too, our formal.
Oh,
you
yes,
have
some
to
of
submit?
some of the MAID partners and the Health Academy partners are
Yeah.
featured on the document. Yep.
Yeah, so those partnerships have been, many of them have been for a long time, and really our hats are off to those businesses that have really given, students opportunities and have partnered with us, so.
You have to be willing to take a risk with a high school student. That's
Oh,
for
yeah,
sure.
yes.
Anyone else? Mr. Zenobia?
Thank you. I kind of along the line of questioning that we had early on with, how many students are involved in this, and is there kind of a breakdown percentage-wise? How many go into, that we can track anyway, that go into a job directly out of high school as a result of this, go into a 2-year, go into a 4-year? Just an idea of.
I don't have it, it's self-reported information that we do ask our exiting seniors, so we would have that information.
Yeah, part of a data report that we used to use was it was called C-Tiers, which really was an abbreviation for something really fun, I'm sure. But it was a way for us to help track graduates and what they were planning to do. So we still survey the kids on what their plan is, where they are in that career planning stage, what their intended outcome is, whether it's a specific degree or a specific industry. We only do a follow-up with what our people are considered CTE concentrators, so that 81% of our seniors get a survey. It's a year after they graduate, and when you get a piece of mail or email from some school district you used to attend, the follow-through is not the best. So we've tried different ways. This last couple years, we've emailed it out. Now we have a way to collect the students' personal email addresses and families' email addresses so that we can get a better response rate. But that's probably the closest data, and then the clearinghouse data would be the other piece.
And I ask that because I think if you were to ask most, certainly high schoolers, what's your plan or what you think your plan should be, a lot of people want to jump to that 4-year college, right? I mean, that's kind of in the mind of a lot of people, and I think it's apparent to many that that's maybe not the best starting point for everyone.
Yeah.
So when those conversations are happening somewhere in the 6th grade and on, probably 8th to 9th grade, are those kind of equal weighted? Is there a lot of interest in other areas than the 4-year degree to go into an apprenticeship, to go into a trade? I mean, how has that progressed over the years, or is?
I would say we showcase all of the opportunities. My goal for a student would be that they have a plan A, B, and C, not just one plan, because we all know that even getting through Waukesha, you need multiple plans, right? So they have the opportunity to explore all of them. Sometimes it's as simple as the right person to indicate, hey, maybe look at this. We try to offer opportunities. I'm going to give you one example, is that with the Business Alliance, we do things called Schools to Skills, and they're field trips that tour 3 different manufacturing facilities as well as WCTC's applied manufacturing. Now, typically we take every single school through a portion of it. It tends to be the students in a tech ed class that are already kind of interested in that pathway. So in some cases it's great because it's opening their eyes to, hey, this is an exact correlation of what I want to do. But sometimes it leaves out the students that aren't in those tech ed classes that don't know about those opportunities potentially. So, we try and include lessons that include, no matter what you're doing, you still need to have a plan. So if you're filling out a job application versus filling out a college essay, there are things that you'll need to prepare for and plan for.
Sure. Just a final thing, do a lot of our partners in the community, is it clear to them, to students, that, to come and work here, there may be an opportunity that will pay your education in the future? Because I know that's probably the biggest thing for most people. You can always go back and get more education.
Yeah.
And if
I
someone
wish
else
they'd
pays
make a
for it-
flyer that would say that for us, because that is something that I would say students don't get necessarily, and employers almost keep it a secret. And I wish they would broadcast that more as like a benefit to coming to work for us. We have a student right now that started at Braley Gear over by West as a junior in the summer, stayed on right now as a youth apprentice, super into what he's doing machining wise, and they're like, we're paying for you, we hope you stay here, but if you don't, you're benefiting Waukesha County, so great. That's what we love to hear and see, and we're seeing it more. I think in the last few years, we're starting to see the change in students understanding that college debt is debt, and how could I re-navigate my career pathway starting sooner? How could I fast track my education? How could I capitalize on things like, we have a student at West right now who's graduating at the end of her junior year because she has enough credits. She's in the dual enrollment program right now for welding, and she has a job where they're paying for her. I mean, she's going to be done with her associate's degree before high school and on $0. Like, awesome. It's just, how do we get those stories out?
Sure. No, that's excellent. It's very important. It's a wonderful program, and I hope more kids get involved in the future, so, thank you.
Plus, melting metal with fire is pretty incredible.
If you ever get to tour Metal Tech, whoo,
Nothing better.
You remember
Mrs.
that?
Kozlowski.
yeah, in the summer.
Yes.
I think I can give you some do-nots for my husband, who does a lot of the welding and machining, and what he comes home looking like.
Oh, I bet.
We would offer safety classes. One of the pieces that I think you kind of briefly mentioned, and for me, you know, I'm a huge fan of this. I think that I would love to see this offered and discussed sooner. So I had two of my daughters that went through the CNA program. And one of the pieces for us to understand too is that there are certain programs within the WCTC, right, that, and I don't want to say it's a lottery, so kind of correct my version there, but there is just that awareness of timing on when to apply, right, and specifically for the CNA program where you've got deadlines and your grade level as that you will be falls in, and having that awareness as to getting all of that. But, you know, for both of our cases, we ended up, you know, paying in advance for that, being reimbursed after the fact upon successful completion. But these are really great things for parents as well to understand. I'm very in tune with trying to get our children to be thoughtful and thinking about where their careers are going to go, but they can't do that without kind of the guiding hands of the parents and seeing that. But I love it. I'm going to agree with you. I think the sooner that we can start really sharing these, because to a lot of the points, this focus on a 4-year is not for everybody. And when you can start to be able to see the world on how many amazing things are out there, it really excites them and helps direct their education.
Absolutely. I think the best thing that happened with academic and career planning is that awareness piece earlier and often. You only know what you know. If you ask my 2-year-old son right now, he wants to be a truck. Eventually, it'll be bigger than that.
Not a truck driver, a
Just
truck.
a truck. Tractor or a truck. So you know, the people that had children in here, you know it, how it evolves, right? I only know this career because I see it and Paw Patrol, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you ask, what does your parent do? They're like, I don't know, work on computers? Like, okay, that could be 100 different things. So having those conversations at home is so valuable, and getting the exposure out there, you know, walking them down the street to see Aries right up the road and just what they all do. And for our educators, we do partner with the Business Alliance for something called Careers Uncovered, and it's really getting the educators back out into industry. So Generac is opening their doors. Generac doesn't just manufacture things. They have accounting, they have, you know, marketing, HR, you name it. So it's getting everyone to understand that the careers are endless. But yeah, I don't know the best way to get all of the information out to all of the people. And so that's where we hope to have, you know, documents like this where we can celebrate and get some data points out in front of families, and then they're asking those questions. Why? How can I get into that?
Thank you, Molly. All right, well, you are looking for us to approve something for you tonight, so we would be looking for a motion to approve the Education for Employment Plan.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Zenobia. Seconded by Mr. Moore. Any further questions or comments? Mr. Como?
Just real quick, the format of the report the last maybe 3 years has been really good. I know we had it was a little different at one time, and it's just is really comprehensive. And do we put this on our website?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought we did. I can't keep track of everything that's up there, but I think it is a piece that we really should should have there, especially if someone's planning on moving to our district. These are the kinds of things that help draw people in. So appreciate it. It's in a nice, readable format and gives a lot of information in small space. And good job on that.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Can you tell I'm going to vote for approval on it? So-
Oh, wait, yes, you didn't do that yet. Drop the mic.
You stole all of our thunder here, but that's okay. I think there's a high probability you might end in the same way, so.
See, that's why I didn't really enjoy doing the video, because I was like, I'm reading my notes.
I'm going to try
but-
that strategy, getting up and just saying.
Yeah, fortunately, Rachel's not here tonight, because I think if she tried that, we'd all be chasing her down the hallway. but- Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you want me to this?
All right, the next item on our agenda is our new item, which is an update on common school funding purchases. So I will hand that over to Mrs. Landish. We have our November 2022 purchases.
Okay, so this is the second time that I am bringing this topic to the attention of this board. And just to review the expenditures as we're working them for common school funds now are a different process in that there's a pre-approval process before our librarians actually make the purchases at all 23 sites. So I do review all the titles that come across my desk before approval. You can see the month-by-month purchases, and so I've attached for you the November purchases by total in school, and you can see the purchases for the month of November total $35,802.72. And I just want to, I guess, confirm or maybe have a discussion or no discussion if I should just keep bringing this every month like this, or how you'd like to proceed.
Mr. Zenobia, please.
Thank you for this. I guess my question would be, how do we know what's being approved? And I mean, without going title by title on some of this stuff. We've had in place a process now, or have been working toward that for the last year, to get a handle on what we had in our libraries, but also what's coming into the library. And I know a lot of this is pushed from, the people that sell us books, obviously. That's where a lot of these titles come from, and it just gets funneled to us. So in looking at this approval, how do we know something isn't slipping through the cracks? And I think part of my issue with this, and part of the learning process has been, there's so much that comes through and so few people to look at it. I mean, it's almost an impossible task to know whether or not something that we don't want in our libraries may end up there. So I guess my question is more to the process of, what does our review look like? How are we even attempting to capture things that are not desirable?
Okay, well, we like to make the impossible possible around here, Mr. Zenobia. So
Good.
I think that a couple things I think out loud as I've followed this process for the past 2 years most closely, within the past 6 months most closely also. We have 5 professionals who do a wonderful job at collaborating with one another across 23 schools and making purchase decisions upon not only professional book reviews, but among one another. And so I trust them and what they put forth, either by what we currently have in our inventory. Many of these purchases are to renew more copies of something that we already have titles of. Some of them are to replace old and worn-out materials that we have, and some of them are new titles. And so we do have one person right now, and that is me looking line item by line item at every single book title that comes in. So I am fully accountable for that, as well as our 5 professionals. And again, with what the student interest is and the teacher interest oftentimes, we put together purchases that we feel are appropriate by grade level and for the schools that it is needed. So it's the tightest it's ever been here in the school district of Waukesha. So again, I can give the board, and we talked about this early on, I could give the board in any Friday update, not just my spreadsheet of total numbers, but I could get you, book line titles that I look at before approval, if that's something the board wants in a packet too. I have no problem doing that. It's just a matter of I'm seeking what you would want in terms of being communicated with around this topic.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. I think so, with a lot of the requests that I had about this, it really stemmed through communication and transparency, right? The goal is to make sure that for our community, our parents, our educators, that for an ongoing basis, we can share with them what is being purchased. And for many of the things, if it's a renewal or expired pieces of, worn out things, I think that's one thing. But new books, until there's a overall view of understanding of the process and trust in what we see in our books, I would want to see, here's a listing of everything that was purchased over the course of the month like we've discussed. I don't necessarily think that as a board we need to have it as an agenda item to talk through every month, but it does need to be posted for our community to be able to see, ask the questions. I know you and I have had several conversations about certain books and things and what we're doing. For me, it's just much more of the transparency to say, we're showing you everything that we're doing, why we're doing it, and if there's a question about that, then our community and the board as a whole can come through you. But I mean, in just the discussions, this process is starting to work. And that is the goal in making sure that we get there. But for us as a collaborative committee, I don't think we need to go through this every month. I just want to make sure that there's access and on a monthly basis, the information is shared.
Kind of a clarifying question. So, Mrs. Kozlowski, you're wanting the titles that we're purchasing to be transparent to the public somewhere?
That's correct.
Okay. I would very much agree with that. And it's such an overwhelming amount that is going to be compiled over the course of the year. New titles, I don't recall what that number was, but probably over 1,000 or so. I don't know. Is that what we bought last year? 1,200, it sounds like, or? I mean, that just sticks in my mind. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it was a considerable number for 5 librarians to go through.
It was 8,000.
It's a big number.
It was 8,000.
I think it was 8,000.
New titles.
I thought, I don't know if that's all new.
Okay. I don't recall, but it was a lot. I mean, it was.
So I'm thinking out loud too, Mr. Zanobi, and I'm thinking that any parent can access currently our library catalog in a very transparent way. So, I mean, yes, I could give you lists of books every month that we purchase or once they're cataloged in there. I mean, again, anyone has access to the transparency of a library catalog at any time.
Yes, but that's already in the library. I mean.
Right, but in theory, when I give you, like tonight.
You give me this, it's already purchased.
I have approved that 35,000 title by title in the month of November.
Then, I guess if we're spending this money, it would be nice to try to head off some of the purchases that would end up being disagreeable. Again, that's an overwhelming process that I know we're trying, but it's such a mess out there. The books that are pushed through schools are the sexual content is wholly inappropriate. It's a national phenomenon. Everyone knows this is occurring. And yet, we are unable to, and this is not anybody's personal fault. It's the way the system is there to spend our money on books, to get content into schools that is wholly inappropriate. This process is great. We're trying, and I greatly appreciate that. But if we just buy stuff and then wait to see what's in it, we're just going to be slowly compiling more and more of this forever and ever and ever. And I guess my question then would be, what happens to this common school fund if we don't spend it in certain areas? I mean, I know we have to. I know we have titles that we've been using forever that we're buying and, that are necessary. I understand all that. But, on the level of new stuff that we can't even properly vet, what do we say to those books?
So I'm going to politely disagree that we don't vet them properly. Again, I think we have had our share of challenges in the past 2 years with this topic, certainly. But I think Waukesha has done an outstanding job and actually been in the front of this very proactively, in a very professional way to make sure that we have grade level appropriate materials in our libraries. Were we 100%? No, we weren't, and everyone knows that. But we have put huge structures in place to make sure that that does not happen. And, I mean, we really have the tightest system around. So besides the 5 professionals doing what they do best, we are collaborating with titles. We're, again, looking line item by every title very proactively to make sure this doesn't happen. As you probably know, we do have some library media book and library book language that we're coming forth in the next month or two through a policy statement that I think will continue to tighten up the process in terms of a complainant process, should there be one. We take it very seriously. We are urgent with requests, and we have, attended to those needs in a very expedient way when they are brought to our attention.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I think as a district, we are doing everything that everybody can, and I certainly appreciate all of your work. I appreciate all of your team's work. You guys have done a lot of heavy lifting in this area, and that is much appreciated. It's the tidal wave that's crashing on us without us being able to stop it, is what I'm talking about. It's the stuff that's coming in that's going to continue to come in because this material is going to be written until people stop buying it. And how we get to that next level, I'm not sure. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. But I don't put that on any individuals here or librarians or anything. I put that on the people that are selling us the books. So I guess if we see this, at least for the next few months, and we get an idea of what those books are, so that we can look back and say, okay, if someone has a question, and we can look back and say, okay, this is what's come in recently. What does this look like for our process? I would very much appreciate that.
Sure.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to share a couple thoughts and maybe an idea about how we could go forward with all of this. To reiterate a little bit of what Mr. Zenobia shared, I am grateful for all the time and effort that you, Mrs. Landish, and your team have put into this, Ms. Gennerman as well. It is, I do not believe it's the work of the board to read every single book that's coming into the district. I think it's our responsibility together collaboratively to make sure that the content is relevant and it's appealing and that it's age appropriate. And I think that's what we have a responsibility to do for our kids and families in the district. And then I think a lot of us, I personally believe very strongly in just parental right to be informed, and I think we're working toward that. So making sure that parents are aware, especially for their minor children under that age threshold, that's very important. And I think we're making the right steps forward on that, and I do think that we started out ahead of the game on this. I appreciate the details in the purchases. I don't envy the situation that you're in to have to make some of these decisions, and I think you could appropriately filter out 99% of the things that are woefully inappropriate, and miss one, and that doesn't go without notice. And so I think that we need to identify maybe a better way to not put you squarely in the middle of all of this. But I also, just in anticipation, a couple weeks ago, there was pretty significant announcement commemorated by press releases and press conferences that the DPI has announced a 30% increase to the common library funds for the next year, which means that we'll go from $635,000 to $845,000, and we are having trouble just keeping track of the things that we're buying right now. So to Mr. Zenobia's point, the problem continues to get bigger. I don't think that's by accident. And we lose our ability to really have that direct knowledge of what's coming in. So we need to have some processes that work for us and that don't put the burden on administrators and board members to be reading page by page the content of the books that are coming in. So hopefully we can work together on that, because it's great to see the increase in resources. I think we, like a lot of districts, struggle to find the ways to spend those dollars. So I would almost wonder why we're not putting that money toward special education resources instead of books for the library. However, there were a couple things on the purchase list that caught my attention, and I know there are limits to how the dollars can be spent. One was the money for computers, which was more than a third of what was on the list. I'm just curious, those MacBooks for the libraries, are those for student use in the libraries?
Yes.
Our staff have access to their own
Correct.
MacBooks, correct?
Those are student use in those libraries, yes.
So how would that work? Student goes in and requests to use it, or they're,
Yeah,
because they all have iPads?
yeah, but these are, I know on the iMacs, they have special software programs. A lot of times, some of our CADware and other,
Oh, okay.
at the high school level, they would have access to that on those.
Okay, higher
specific
powered machines
workstations.
that, okay.
Right.
Great. And then I noticed one was the Overdrive content credit. So I was kind of curious, was that just a prepay for content for Overdrive, or is there a list of titles that will come later that kind of get pushed against that credit?
Both. So Overdrive, again, you have to put a content credit in ahead of the purchase. So like in essence, I approve the 2,500, but then it doesn't really go through until I approve the PDF of all the purchases.
Okay.
I'm probably not explaining it well. Melena's in the office, or in the audience, and she's like, you're swinging and you're missing, or you're swinging.
But it's not an open PO, is what you're telling me. It's not something where we're just going to get material and, yeah.
No, I'm still,
Thank you.
I'm still monitoring that, correct?
Okay. Okay. And again, thank you for all of that. I think we're moving in the right direction, but obviously still have some work to do. So my recommendation was going to be that perhaps we continue to communicate this to the board. We keep it on the agenda, and really when we come to that item, just we identify at that point if anybody has any questions or clarifying comments. Otherwise, we move past it. And if we
Okay.
could maybe do that for the next couple months with TNL until we get comfortable with the materials.
Okay. And then not just the spreadsheet, but in the attachments, you also want me to have like all the Follett and every single book title order in that month as well?
If possible.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Como.
So processes can involve leveraging vendors and subcontracting out. And, you know, I'm by no means an expert in this area, but are there any vendors that would be considered independent that do reviews and we could leverage those services? And I just don't know if they exist. I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes, Jody. And I know the limited number of staff members that you have, and I know how this has really increased, workload for you and your team. Are there any tools, I guess is the question, are there any tools available from vendors that we would consider independent that could help us with this task?
I think the review part is still something that we are working on. For example, the word balanced is always used, and I would say some people might feel that the current scholarly reviews that we use are perhaps not balanced. That may be someone's perspective. So I think we are still in the midst of broadening our balanced review, even that piece of it, to make sure that we are considering all sources and reviews equitably at the forefront of making the decisions. I don't know, Jen, do you know if there's any independent vendor doing this work? Not that I know of. Not an independent vendor,
Fair enough.
yeah,
Appreciate it. Just trying to help brainstorm
yeah.
on the issue.
And Melena's in the
Yeah, please.
audience, so, but I would just add that a lot of the training the library media specialists have gone through and the work that they've been doing is, reviewing those books. And so, it's really, I'm not aware of any outside resource that we could be using to do it differently, but it is kind of, we have the staff we have to do that.
Yeah, feel free.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from committee members about how you'd like to have the information presented, or whether or not you want to keep it on the agenda? Mrs. Kozlowski.
I think I agree with you. The initial request was that we have a monthly report out that lists the book titles that is shared both within board docs and for our community to view, just in the case of transparency and communication, until we get the process refined and defined and really have a built trust that we understand what's going on. I'm a strong supporter that adding visibility and a spotlight to information helps us keep each other accountable, making sure that we are doing things. And so, Dr. Piasek, I think the approach that you have is consistent with what our ask was, at least for the next months, similar to what we do at FNF with the vouchers.
Sure.
We'll allow the list to be reviewed. We would ask the committee members to make suggestions if they have comments before then, and then just move on through the topic so that it doesn't become a burden during the meetings, right? We want to make sure that we're allowing people to ask and have visibility.
Okay. Mr. Como.
Just wondering if we want to see a list of books that you considered but you rejected also. Because I'm assuming that you have made rejections.
I have made one since I started this process. So,
I thought it might have been more telling than that, but
if this process is working as I intended to, I should not have.
they shouldn't be getting to your
I should
desk
not
is
have
what you're
any
saying.
Rejections.
Gotcha. Because you're leveraging the five.
Yes.
5 people.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And I think a big part of this is just the learning process for all of us, right? Really understanding how these titles come through and how we spend these valuable resources on them. So, all right. Anything else? Very good, thank you. We can move on. The next item on the agenda is going to be the easiest policy review of the year.
Oh, boy. Set us up for that one.
Oh, you just jinxed us.
Yeah.
Okay. We have an action request to approve Board Policy 270001, School Performance and State Accountability Report Cards. I might have gotten ahead of myself a little bit. You all received a link to that policy. You'll note the strikeouts in red and the additions in green. Are there any questions about the changes to that policy?
Hopefully it is easy, Dr. Piasek. Is this where I get up and walk out? Right, before that. I will.
Only Molly can do that, sorry.
Okay, fair enough. I do want to point out to the board and the community that it is visible on our website as it says it is, but if you go, and I just have this on the screen here, if you're on our website and you're at the main menu, if you go to the welcome section where it says key performance indicators, our commitment, and then accountability, if you click on accountability, that's where we've set up for you the district report cards. All of our school report cards are listed. The notice of educational options is also listed, and then the link to the WISE-Public portal is also posted on our website, so.
Any questions or comments about the modifications? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Wait, I need a motion, sorry. I'm way ahead of myself on this one.
I move approval of policy 2700.1, school performance and state accountability report cards as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Como.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kozlowski. All right, now, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to our content areas, and tonight we're going to focus on social studies. We have 2 AP course textbooks that are requesting to move into the pilot phase. So Mrs. Landish, do you want to get us started?
Yep, so Mrs. Herman put the video together for you. She's unable to be here tonight. As you know, we have a employee funeral this evening that many of our team members are attending. So this is in the very initial pilot stages. It's just important for the board to know that this topic will be back in April, May, and then we would be seeking approval in June. The AP World, currently we have, and AP Government, there's 1 teacher from each of our high schools representing this coursework. It's a very similar process that we follow with our curricular design process. And then just one more thing to add, each of the adoptions we're thinking are going to cost around $35,000 for each adoption, and we had already earmarked that as part of your first round of approval from the ESSER monies in terms of the instructional materials. So these one-time textbook purchases that'll get us through, don't quote me, but probably the next 8 years is usually the cycle, between 8 to 10 years for the AP textbooks. So if there's any questions or things that you think we should be considering over the next few months, I can take that back to the team. But as I mentioned, the next update will be in April as they pare down the resources.
Mr. Moore,
So,
thank you.
thank you, Jody. Thank you all for being here. I had a chance to kind of research a little bit about who the authors are of these books. I don't know if the board members have done that as well, but I'm a social teacher myself, and so I kind of am familiar with some of these names. I just think that we need to really take a look at some of the authors of the books and some of the content that they have published out there previously in other books, especially one of them who was a professor at the University of Minnesota. So I'm not going to go into details so much right now, but I do encourage the board and the public to kind of look at who some of these authors are that are on these books that we are recommending that the College Board AP College Board is recommending for our students. And I would just leave it there. So.
Were you specifically looking at the world history or the government?
AP government.
Okay, thank you. Maybe as a follow-up question, Jody, how do the textbooks get narrowed down to in this case, the 2 each that are requested for pilot? I know in some cases we pilot more than 2, but what does that process look like?
Just generally, with any textbook purchases, we use ed reports and their reviews in terms of who we bring in as vendors or possible textbooks. And then in this case, to Mr. Moore's point, the College Board actually has recommended texts that follow the tests in theory as well. So we take that into consideration. So that would be the second resource that we use because of the College Board piece.
Mr. Zenobia?
So you're saying our options are limited or very limited, or are there other titles we could explore in the AP? The only 2 that I was able to really dig into that are here on board docs were the 2 American government textbooks. There's not much here to dig into. I thought they were incredibly biased, but a lot of people would say I'm incredibly biased. So maybe that goes without saying. I guess my real question is: are there better options that we could look at that satisfy the board, the AP board, or the College Board rather, that we can look at that are aside from these 2? One of these gives, I don't know if this is something that, I thought it was kind of shocking, but it references Wikipedia as an actual source. And I don't know, is that commonplace for AP classes to be like, this is a source you can use and learn from? Because I thought they were kidding. But I know we have to, if we're going to have AP courses, we have to do what we're told on the books that are going to teach kids how to pass these tests. If we could do it without so much bias, would be better. But I guess that's my question. Are there other options that we could see?
So I can get you in Friday's packet a comprehensive list of any of the titles that were recommended by the College Board. I don't have that in front of me, and I wasn't
Sure.
working closely with that team so that
Okay.
I can give you that information right now, but I can give you that information in your Friday packet.
Okay. Thank you.
So it sounds like we could also send some questions forward to
Absolutely.
Mrs. Herman if we want clarifications
Yes.
on, how they converged on these couple of titles. I think really in the best interest of everybody's time, we want to make sure that we don't run through pilots and then land on books that up front people are saying not super comfortable with the
course.
direction that it's taking.
Absolutely.
So I would recommend anybody who hasn't had time to dig in to
Yes.
these, take a look at them, make sure, understand kind of where they're at, and then I think some clarification on how we landed on those specific titles would be helpful.
Yes.
How big are the teams that are actually working on these?
Right, so it's just one AP teacher from each of our high schools currently. So again, AP World, Mrs. Hagan from West, Mr. Ewing from North, and Mr. Freshwater from South. And then for AP Government, it's Ms. Anderson from West, Mr. Williams Hartling from South, and Mr. Gerlinger from North. So basically our AP teachers, along with Rachel's, Mrs. Herman's coordination.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions on this? So,
I will get you in Friday's packet, again, the question, how did we narrow it down? I'll get you what they started with, So you can see the funnel and the entire list and what College Board is recommending. And then, as Dr. Piasek mentioned, I encourage you to just email me or Mrs. Herman directly. We can have some offline dialogue as they prepare for their next presentation. We can give you updates in the Friday packet in terms of process and just work proactively so that we're not getting down to being pressured on in any way to make decisions that aren't in the best interest with the knowledge available for the board members.
Thank you. All right. All right, we'll move on to our key performance indicators and welcome Jen Gennerman, our instructional data specialist for the district, back to the table. Welcome, Jen.
Hi.
And Jen, you gave us a very nice detailed overview of the report cards, which is greatly appreciated. I might have watched it several times, just saying. But I did appreciate the level of detail and your focus on some of the subcategories, which was very helpful. I think sometimes we tend to just look at the final answer. And I know last time you presented, we kind of ended up hashing back through the material again, so I expect we might bounce around that presentation a little bit. But I thought it might be good if we could pull up the presentation and then maybe skip past some of the instructional content that you had,
Okay.
but focus a little bit on some of the things that you highlighted as far as the subcategories and how our various grade levels are doing
Okay.
and the takeaways.
So before I jump in, just two things. I apologize for not printing the whole report card. I will do that. Jody, I was trying to get your attention. I just did the first page just because that's really what I'll be working off of tonight. Obviously, there's more detailed with each report card for the district and school that can be found online. And then the other thing is we did make a couple updates to the presentation, so you see that in board docs. Some of those things we'll talk about tonight depending on our starting point. So if it's okay, I'll just start with the overview of the report card. Is this kind of what you're thinking?
And I probably misspoke because now I'm looking at actually slide 2, which is that timeline. I think that history of how we got here is really important to kind of set the stage for where we're at, because the change that they made last year kind of sent us all into a tailspin a bit, so.
So I can just briefly talk about some of the changes. Since we've had the school and district report cards, it's been several years, but one of the things I like to bring to the forefront are the changes that happen. It's not, while it may look similar or different from year to year, it's not the same visual representation, and sometimes it's not the same calculations with the same data. And so I just want to be upfront and transparent so that everyone knows that. So I just went back to 2018-19, since this is my first year, sharing this report with you guys. I think this is a key year. This highlights that the ACT Aspire results were used for the first time in the school report cards from the 2018-19 on the school 2018-19 report cards. Why this is such a big factor is because we use that data for a different number of years in different priority areas. So at the time when the report cards came out, we were told that the data was being used. And for the achievement area and growth, they went back for 3 years of data. And they went back for 5 years of data in the closing gaps priority area, which is now the target outcomes. But think about when that happened, we had data that was being calculated into the school and district report cards for students that had graduated and maybe were in the second year post-graduation. So when that was calculated and added, it was a learning curve and just something to be aware of, and that's just something I like to share, that as they change over time, I think it's important to bring these differences forward. In 2019-20, there was no formal finalized report card brought forward to the public, but we had an internal document that we were able to use because they were revising the format and the look. For the school report cards that summarize the 2020-21 school performance, one of the biggest changes was that overall accountability rating. And you'll see here on the slide, I have an arrow to the rating chart there. And there's a star by the minimal score range for exceeds expectation. So prior to the report cards for the 2021 school year, the minimal expectation for the minimal range for exceeds expectations, that number was 73. So when it lowered to 70, of course, across the state, more schools or districts fell within that exceeds expectation category. For us, that year, and Jody, back me up on this, for us that year, we did have a score of 70.4. So it just put us right in the very beginning of exceeds expectation. Had that change not happened, we would have still been at that meets expectation category. Our most recent report cards that we're sharing tonight and that we've been working on for some time, there have been minimal design changes and minimal changes. But one of the changes I do want to share is around that course information that Jody had talked about earlier. So now they are only factoring information for students who had 90-day enrollments for those courses. And so that when we look at all of our numbers, it may be fewer students who maybe they weren't here with us the whole school year and they moved to a different school. So that's one of the new pieces of data and how they're calculating that for this year. In your handout, when I gave you just the first page of the report card, there's two other really important pieces to support, resources to support with the report card, and that is the report card at a glance and data at a glance. These are two foundational pieces I printed for you, but this is just really helpful and to better understand. If you're not going to look at the technical manual, these are two nice resources to have.
We're going to be doing that Monday.
Do you want me to just kind of keep rolling, start with the...
Well, maybe just to roll off of that for a second, and I appreciate your explanation on how the scores changed last year, and so we kind of sneaked into that exceeds. The number still went down, so relative to the new scale, we went down. Last year, DPI also put out kind of a transfer function between prior year, new scale, and so it looked like if they had used the old scale last year, we would have still been in that meets expectations category. Mm-hmm. So I think this year, what I'm going to say is, I noticed that when we looked at the top 10 size districts in the state, we stayed second. There was some shifting of positions, but all of their scores seemed to go down as well. Was there a common area where those scores went down, or do we know if it was kind of all over the map? Did everybody, for example, see a change in achievement, or?
I have not drilled into that level of detail in other people's report cards. As far as our CISA area DAC meetings, we haven't, no one came out and said, hey, oh my gosh, there had been years that we were all seeing a downward trend or a score down in overall or one of the priority areas. That was not something that came up, but obviously our comparables with the 10 other largest districts are outside of CISA sometimes.
Yeah, I will say too, I didn't dig into the ELA math specific, but I did dig in a little bit to the overall report card, and I would say that of the top 10 largest districts, there's only one district that moved up last year from 20, or in the year's time span, and that was Appleton, but all other 9 districts took a dip. So broadly speaking.
Because it would be difficult for us to stay second and lose those points if everyone didn't see kind of a
Correct.
shift overall.
Yeah. And I was kind of looking at all the way back to 2017. I mean, we started, in essence, in third place. We held the third place position in 17, 18, 18, 19. And we moved up to second place, and we've held that second place for the past 2 years.
I know there's probably questions about kind of the subtleties of all of this. And I think we have a tendency to focus on the red because people run to the red. Before we do that, maybe we could talk a little bit about the successes which you highlighted, and I appreciated you doing that. I know we have some elementary schools that are consistently performing very highly, relative to other districts in the state, other schools in the state. We talk about that a little bit, and then maybe come back to some of the clarifying questions about where we saw some room for improvement.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to skip through this area. With the report card, we have the overall score and the priority areas. As I shared in my video, there's also additional data points to look at and details. With anything, it's additional information as we move on in that continuous improvement lens in all of our actions. A few of the celebrations, when we looked at some of the school report cards, in each school report card for each priority area, there's an additional chart at the very top. And this was not in years ago, like the report cards from years ago. But what we're able to see is how that specific school did in that priority area compared to schools across the state. And that's where we looked at this, and there's several things for us really to think about as celebrations. This chart here that I'm showing, the school score was the same or higher than 81% of K-5 schools in the state. So that's not just looking at Waukesha County or even part of the state. That's really across the state. So that's a great celebration. This is actually the data from Hawthorne. And so you'll see there's a little image on the very top of some of the things that went out to celebrate that growth for that school. I have all the overalls. Here are a few more celebrations. And really, all these celebrations come from that same areas, not just looking at that overall score, but looking beyond that a little bit more deeper about how are students performing compared to schools across the state. So Banting was another one. Their score in the area of growth was the same or higher than 98.8% of school K-5 schools in the state. So that's a huge celebration. Rose Glen scored at the same or higher than 93% of K-5 schools in the state in the area of achievement. So you can see different schools kind of having higher celebrations in either growth or achievement. Meadowbrook was another one just to celebrate their achievement. Their score was the same or higher than 88% of schools across the state. We have a few others that extend beyond the elementary. This first one is for Waukesha STEM Academy in the area of achievement. Their achievement score is the same or higher than 92% of the K-8 schools across the state. Waukesha Engineering Prep had an achievement score of 84.4, and this was the same or higher than 97% of 912 schools across the state. West High School is one to celebrate for their growth. This school, their score was at 84.7, or they scored the same or higher than 84.7 of the schools across the state for 912 schools. So these are a few of the celebrations that we shared as the public was able to see the report cards. We also use these with some of the communication pieces as we communicated the results to each family from each school as well.
Mrs. Kozlowski. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. I do want to give you, again, huge accolades. I think your presentation was excellent.
Thank you.
I think that your pace and slowness and attention and letting it absorb was really, really good. This is I work with data, as you do. Like, this is tough stuff, right? I mean, this is a lot. There's a lot of stuff that's feeding in behind this, which, as we know, data can give you pictures of how things are without showcasing other pieces. And while I'm thrilled with our district, right, I like to see us on the top tiers. The one pieces that this does not talk about is proficiency. And you've done a nice job calling that out to assess that when we're saying, where are we when it comes to achievement and proficiency, this report card is not highlighting that. And a couple pieces that I want to note with that, so when you take a look at Waukesha in comparison to other districts, if as a state in a comparison, 80% of us are not proficient, right? This isn't saying that we're somehow, it's just saying on a scale of who is better in the proficiency or lack thereof, we are higher on the not proficient. And I think there are some distinctions that, without looking at this report card and shining the light on it, that this is, there's a lot of great stuff here, but there's also some things that we have a lot of work to do. Hawthorne, West, great examples of holding steady. I think those are amazing, especially when you take a look at how some of the scores are calculated that are including COVID years, that we were able to maintain. Those are great things to celebrate, but we have a lot of work left to do, and that's the one piece that this doesn't highlight. And I know that we're going to have more time to help me better understand the algorithms that go through really where these numbers come from. I'm very grateful. I really think you did a great job. This is pretty challenging. And then the last piece to really highlight for me is when we take a look at the priority weighting, right, so the graduation rate. The question I take a look at is how many of our graduating students are walking into the world not proficient? Because this doesn't say that. While we're graduating, we're putting them into a world that, whether that's trades, whether it's 4-year, whether that, however that is still a focus area for this district as a whole. Again, I don't, I talk about not being a Debbie Downer. I think there's a lot of really wonderful things to celebrate, and we're doing such great things. But achievement and proficiency is not represented in this, and we are not there.
I can just share a little bit more that I didn't share in the video. If you look at the detailed pieces, you get a 3-year graph of English and math proficiency over time. And I know in my recent report out of state assessments, I'm sharing that information as well. We use those charts in one of our recent all admin meetings to really guide some conversation and collaboration. The other piece is it's the same data, it's just filtered differently, which I think we get stuck in because then it makes it a little bit more confusing. So what I mean by that is, like, we have all the kids taking the forward assessment, and I can come to you and say, based on the forward, we have, I forget it, 3rd grade, I think. I remember it went up in percentages of proficient and advanced, but whatever number we were at. But then what happens is when we take that same data and the calculations for the report card, we're factoring in only, this is one of the biggest filters, is the full academic school year kids. So think about if a student moves to the district or moves in or out during the school year. Just because they took the assessment with us, when we report on that proficiency with the report card, that student data is not always factored in. And I think those filters and those different calculations make it really difficult. But the proficiency chart on the achievement area, we were able to dig a little bit more into that and have some good conversations of not only what are we doing for the lower performing students, like that target group that we have, but also what are we doing for the students that are proficient and advanced, and are they staying proficient or advanced, or are they moving from proficient to advanced? Like, what are we doing on that end too? So that has been a hard conversation, but I think with all that, we're increasing the data literacy, among our leadership team to really be able to dive in and really understand the information.
No, and I think that's great. And I know that the school report cards are only one snapshot of a thing that we look at to assess overall, right? We do take a look at a lot of the other pieces as to where we are in test scores, how are we coming along. I just caution, right, our community that this is not telling us that we're overly proficient. This is grading us in comparison based on timestamp things, and there's weighted averages and algorithms and against other districts, and, that we're all somewhat the same. This makes us look better proficient than comparison, when in reality, the state as a whole has a lot of work to do, including the school district of Waukesha. But I love what you're doing, and I think the data transparency, that this is where we start to move and make change, right? When we start to understand what is happening with this is what drives that. So I think you're doing a great job. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And one of the pieces that we had added on is just more of that, like, how are we using that data? And, when we were starting to get the draft of the report cards, and I started having conversations with principals, I think there were just a lot of like surface level conversations and questions of like, oh yeah, like I know this and that. But then as we had some time together and allowed them time to go a little bit deeper, then all of a sudden we're getting questions so that they can have meetings with their sales team about the value add growth. And they're like, Jen, give me that chart, So I think, having that clarity, having that time and just that leadership. Jody has other examples of just how we're using it, but that's been beneficial.
Anybody else? Okay, my turn again. I don't want to, belabor some of the data-specific things, because I think we've learned a lot, and we all have to kind of get comfortable with this new format of things. I was kind of intrigued by the new ideas, or some of the discussion about where we go from here.
Oh,
I saw expressions like IXL that I haven't heard in a while that makes me happy.
Oh.
I'd like to hear, maybe in combination with, our middle schools really have just been kind of consistently plopping along at barely meeting expectations. And I understand how much there is to all of that, and been living the middle school life for a while. So I understand even the human piece to all of that, I probably still remember middle school. It's a tough time. So there's a lot going on. What, if anything, are we doing with middle school? And then kind of a loaded question, because I see the emphasis on maybe some new tools.
Sure, I can handle that. And thank you for setting me up for that, Dr. Piasek. So a couple things. I was actually in a 2-hour middle school meeting this afternoon, talking about instructional minutes, and just really, again, what we can guarantee for instructional minutes with our new curricular resources at the middle level. That is at the level of rigor that we need to be prepared for high school. So with 2 new middle school principals, this is a wonderful opportunity for sort of a new lens to come into and kind of analyze where we are with our structures. So what you were referring to was the use of IXL, and I put in parentheses like IXL, that's what it stands for, but it really is a personalized learning platform in terms of standards-based, adaptive, finding where kids have the gaps, and filling that gap. What it's also giving is predictability around analytics for our teachers. So we are like 1 month in the use of this. In fact, if you call Horning right now, the teachers will tell you that they can't log in. So that's just how new this is, but that's why I put it as a new idea in process. The teachers are really, really excited about the resource. Special education has been using it, but now regular education and special education in the Tier 2 area specifically, so during that skills time, all our middle school students will have access to this, which, again, the conversations today, they were super excited about. So we're already talking about what that guaranteed structure is in the house structure to make this happen accessible for all students. And Jen talked about it, but when we talk about the fringes, it's not just who we're intervening with, it's who we're progressing for our advanced and gifted learners as well. So that's what's really nice about that platform. What else happening at the middle level? Again, just kind of analyzing that schedule. And then I will say just in general, I want to say this out loud because our professional learning communities have been around a long time. I would say this is a model that we want schools to follow and be successful in terms of teacher collaboration and looking at data. But I have to give our teachers tons of credit for all our achievement gains, right? They are the number one predictor, as the research shows, that will increase student achievement. And so their work in the professional learning communities, being transparent with their teaching practices, they're now videotaping their teaching and having conversations about what that looks like for students. And that all is part and parcel in their SAIL continuous improvement work. So just a few of those things to highlight. Looking back at the slide, let's see, you're on promising practices. We know in this committee in particular has been, I'm very thankful for the standards alignment piece. I think that is getting us to a place where we finally need to be with guaranteed high-quality instructional resources. The instructional assistance piece in our district too, I think people always ask me like, what's working well and how are we leveraging that across 23 schools? I think our assistants taking an intentional role, especially at the elementary level in our small group instruction with phonics and things like that, have been helping, especially the model that they're operating at Prairie, and they've seen those academic gains there as well. So overall, I think there's some promising practices that we want to replicate. And then those new ideas on that last slide, Kelly, as mentioned, discussion around the high school schedule is just sort of happening. If you're going to ask me what is happening, I'm not going to tell you because I don't really know. I mean, because we're not that far yet. So the initial conversation was, is the high school schedule working for our students? What is working for them? And what could be enhanced? So that's going to happen over the next couple months as well. And I did want to mention too, at the elementary level, if you've been around education long enough, the pendulum has swung a little bit from specialization or not. And I think now many elementary schools in some grade levels are swinging back to having all their students, meaning teaching math and literacy. It's not every school and every grade level doing that, but I will say the schools that are seeing the stagnancy in their data are looking differently at the model of instruction at the elementary level. So always good for the board to know, as Jen mentioned, how we're using the data, what we do in the day-to-day operations to make high-quality changes for our students.
Yeah, I know that you all have spent a lot of time talking with our administrators about this. It's not just something that, you know, we get the results and then set it aside. It's something that's guiding conversations and strategies, which I appreciate. I'm just happy to see that there's some conversation around the high school schedule, and we'll give you all the time that you need to bring that back to us. So take your time, talk to people. All right, any other questions, clarifications, or comments? I really appreciate the detailed overview of all of this. Thank you. Last call on this topic. Jen, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Maybe, sorry, I spoke too soon again, just to kind of go back to our schedule, which I think is working very well. The next report out will be in January.
In February.
February,
actually.
thank you.
We have a little bit of a change on that. So MAP will come in, yeah, there's no report out in January, but we'll be back on the timeline in February.
Okay. I think it's really great to have this all transparent and strategic, so thank you very much for that. Okay. The last opportunity is for recommendations for future meetings. Is there anything that anyone would like to propose for future discussion? All right. Seeing nothing, thank you all for your time tonight. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.